Every single phase of private practice has its own unique challenges and its own unique opportunities. Whether you're starting and growing a solo practice, getting a group practice going, whether you're already a group practice boss, or you want to go big and go national with the skills you have, every phase has its challenges. And doing that in community with people and learning from other folks and having that guidance is so, so important. That's why we have a membership community for every phase of practice. Next Level Practice is for solo practitioners to help you get organized, fill up your practice, and get that solo practice rocking. We have small groups, we have accountability partners, we have live events every single week. And also, if in the first 3 months, in the first 90 days, you're not satisfied, we have a 90-day money-back guarantee. Next, we have Group Practice Launch. Group Practice Launch is a 6-month program specifically for you to launch a group practice. We have weekly meetings with that as well as guided courses, and you get full access to Next Level Practice. And you're guaranteed to hire someone in the first 6 months, or you get to go through it again for free. Next, we have Group Practice Boss. Group Practice Boss is for people that have group practices and want to continue to grow. All those ups and downs of having a group practice, of changing that mindset, being in community with other people, and getting that support from us. We, with that as well, have weekly meetings, and you get to come to Next Level Practice events as well. So that's 8 meetings a month that you could come to live to get extra help. Also, there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. Lastly, we have Audience Building Academy. Audience Building Academy is specifically for people that are ready to level up and go national. Maybe you want to get a traditionally published book, have a podcast, launch some e-products and e-courses and scalable income. Audience Building Academy is specifically for you so that you can level up and go national. We'll walk you through exactly how you go from having a solo or a group practice to going national. We'll help you build your email list, get on podcasts, and really level up. So no matter what your phase is, we have a membership community for you. Over at practiceofthepractice.com/memberships, you can read all about them and sign up. Go in there and decide which membership phase is for you and join today. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1156. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. This month, we are doing the Even Better Year series. We are so excited about this series. Small steps in the right direction rather than these giant things that we do for just a month. That's how we roll here at Practice of the Practice. Whether you're growing your private practice in one of our membership communities, or maybe you are improving your clinical skills, or maybe you're just figuring out things outside of your business that bring you life. We want you to take steps in the right direction over time that we support. So I'm really excited to have you here as part of our Even Better Year series. I'm really excited about our guest today, Dr. Diane Gehart. Diane is an award-winning author, educator, and TEDx speaker. She has trained thousands of licensed mental health professionals over the past 30 years, translating complex clinical theories into easily understood principles and practices. She's the founder of the Therapy That Works Institute, pioneering a unifying framework for psychotherapy, and is a professor emerita at California State University, Northridge. Her authored works include Theory and Treatment Planning in Counseling and Psychotherapy, Mastering Competencies in Family Therapy, Mindfulness and Acceptance in Couple and Family Therapy, and Mindfulness for Chocolate Lovers, a lighthearted way to stress less and savor more each day. Diane, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me.
I got to start with chocolate. Do you love chocolate a ton? Is that why you wrote the book? Or tell us more about writing a whole book on chocolate.
I do love chocolate. And I've taught mindfulness now for decades, and the classic exercise was with raisins. And when I would travel around and try to present, those raisin boxes got crushed. And so I decided, you know what? Because I would mindfully eat chocolate all the time for myself.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I'm just going to bring chocolate. So that's how it started. And I've had a ton of fun, teaching it that way because chocolate just opens itself up to lots of metaphors. So I had a lot of fun, meditating with chocolate.
Mm. Yeah, my daughter and I, her name's Lucia. We went to St. Lucia for her 13th birthday, and she got to pick kind of different activities we did there. And it was so cool to see her kind of organize it with a Trello board and all that. And one of the things we did was a chocolate making thing where we had to grind the cocoa nibs by hand in this like really hot like stone bowl, and it just gives you an appreciation for how chocolate used to get made because we're making this and pounding it like crazy. And the final bar that we made was such a gritty chocolate. Like it's okay, but it just helps you understand just all that goes into like separating the butter from the nibs and then bringing it back together and adding the sugar. And we're doing this on this beautiful like cocoa farm. It's just
Wow.
amazing all that goes into just this delicious piece of chocolate.
Sounds like so much fun. And it sounds like it can be a great meditation too. So awesome.
Yeah. Well, so you have this unifying theory. You've been working on this for a while and you've been training people. I mean, the books that you've written, I mean, I feel like I probably have read many of them throughout my life without even realizing you were the author of them. Because especially early on in my career, I feel like I bought every single book that was on like theory and treatment. Because, you have like, 2 years, 3 years of grad school, and then you're thrown into these sessions and it's just like, oh my gosh, I do not feel ready to be in here. And so I devoured a lot of that early career. Tell me about the unifying framework. How did it come about, and kind of what made you want to bring this framework together?
Well, it kind of evolved without my conscious attempting to create it. I've been a textbook author for almost 3 decades, and I've written books on both counseling theories as well as family theories. And so, I've done a deep dive on at least 50 different theories. And when I write my textbooks, I really try to describe what people were doing in the room, not just, kind of the theoretical concepts, and to really get as practical as possible and put it into really simple language. And what began to happen as I did that is that I began to create this framework in my head to compare and contrast everything. And so over the years, slowly this model kind of developed as I'm trying to explain in very simple terms. But we all know that so many of these theories kind of sound alike. And we're like, God, didn't someone say this 10 years ago? And a theoretician or your professor, I was a theory professor, right, will say, no, 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 that's totally different concept. And let me tell you why. But what I've discovered over the years, and this is so ironic because I'm a theoretician. I'm a textbook author, for the love of God. But I've begun to realize, like, wow, we have way too many of these theories. It's just creating a lot of confusion. And when you're in the room, they actually can be a bit of a problem. For example, solution focused therapists talk about finding exceptions to problems, and narrative therapists talk about finding unique outcomes or sparkling moments. And the truth is, like, theoretically, conceptually, they truly are different things. But when you're sitting in that room face to face with a client, it's the same thing. You're just looking for a time when the problem could have happened, but it didn't. And having all of this jargon to have to sort through and stumble through, I think really makes us less effective in the room.
Yeah. And so take us through what have you discovered with the unifying framework for psychotherapy?
So, this evolved. I mean, I've been supervising folks for over 30 years. I've been writing about these theories and trying to, train folks on how to become a highly effective clinician, as quickly and easily as possible. There's actually some fascinating research that about 15% of mental health professionals are just simply more effective across the board than everyone else. It doesn't matter whether they're early in their career or later in their career. It doesn't matter if you give them a manualized treatment or just tell them do whatever the heck you want to do in there. So there's certain things that we know kind of work better. And so that's really what this therapy that works unifying framework is about. Like, let's just focus on what gets results in the room, right? And be a little less attached to all of our theory that tells us how things should be going and what should be happening. And let's just focus on what actually does happen in the room.
So walk us through kind of some of the key bullet points or pillars of it.
Absolutely. So there's 6 components, so to speak. And the first one is self of the clinician. And if you look at all the different, I think of there being streams of research on specific theories, on common factors, on highly effective clinicians. We actually have multiple streams of research in our field. But when you look across all of them, who the person is and how they relate in the room is consistently the most, the top predictor of whether or not they're going to be positive outcomes. And so I start training folks in this unifying framework by looking at themselves and, not just saying, go get some therapy or do some mindfulness, do some self-care, but really looking about how do you live your life day to day when you do this type of work? And I think that's a real important thing to look at. And so the self of the clinician, we start looking at, how are we doing as humans, emotionally, relationship wise, health wise, financially even, and looking at the 360 self of the therapist and learning how to set a personal development plan that you can use across all of your life and setting small little goals and moving towards them. So we start kind of just looking at who you are as a human. The next piece is kind of the therapeutic relationship. And, most of us were all trained in empathy and the Carl Rogers core conditions, which are absolutely necessary. But when you start looking at the current research, there's so much more to what these highly effective clinicians are doing. And so we really look at how you enter the client's kind of lived reality. I guess I'll share real quickly the metaphor I use to teach this, and it is that we have to enter their meaning-making system. And so this kind of is grounded in some social constructionist approaches and also some interpersonal neurobiology. And so in terms of entering a client's meaning-making system, I like to think of it, and the best metaphor I can think of is comes out of Star Trek. And it comes out of an old version of Star Trek where there was the Starship Enterprise, and there was a room called the holodeck. And the holodeck was a room that the user programmed, and you could create, an island paradise, another planet, your home when you were a child, right? But the user programs the characters and the logic of that world. And so this is different than a VR headset where you've got an app that someone else has programmed. And so I think the best metaphor for understanding how to talk with a client is you are blindfolded in their holodeck. You are blindfolded in their meaning-making system. And that the first step in helping a client is to try to step out of all of your meaning-making systems, which are assumptions or biases, which we can never fully let go of, but to, as much as you can, step out of that and realize that you are blindfolded in someone else's meaning-making system. And so in their holodeck, lions can be prey animals who are grazers and gentle, and the gazelles can be the apex predators. You just don't know till you ask. And, clouds could be found on the ground and rivers can float through midair. You just don't know until you stumble through their world and ask questions. And so as you relate in this way, there's this very much getting in tune with the clients. And Dan Siegel talks a lot about how that they can actually now in their interpersonal neurobiology research, they're looking at something called neural resonance, and where when two people are connecting and communicating, they can actually have a measurable neural resonance. They feel in sync with each other. We all know that feeling when someone gets you, and you're kind of like in sync. There's actually a neurological piece to that. And so that's what you're trying to do as the therapist when you're first connecting with the client. So this, who you are in the room, how you show up, and how you enter and listen to your client. It's very attuned, and this kind of connects with that research on the highly effective clinicians. There's this attunement that's very subtle. It's moment to moment in terms of relating to your client and understanding, how they are making sense of whatever situations they're describing to you in the room. I'm just going to stop there, make sure that that's all making sense to you before I go too much further.
Yeah, keep going. I love it.
So you enter the client's world, you try to understand, and you want to get basically what I call the movie, which is a behavioral description of what happened, and then how they interpret it. And then where the kind of unification or synthesis comes in is in terms of case conceptualization. We use a framework, and a framework is not a theory. A theory explains why people do what they do, and then we come up with, ideas for how to help them. A framework is simply a system for doing. So when you're in the room working with a client, how can you draw on, all of the theories that we have? So we have over 500 psychotherapy theories with 50 major theories taught in like universities across our various disciplines. And so the unifying framework synthesizes, it's not integrative, because integrative is like cognitive plus behavioral. You get cognitive behavioral, right? Or an emotionally focused couples therapy. It's attachment theory plus systems plus humanistic. They're clearly identified. But what we're doing is just boiling down all the theories, trying to get away from as much jargon as we can to just get at some of the key concepts. And so the framework for conceptualization is not going to shock anyone listening. It is looking at what's going on behaviorally, looking on what's going at the emotional level, which includes that secure attachment as well as expressed emotions, looking at what's going on cognitively, which is, of course, our beliefs and schemas, but also our identity narratives, like who we tell ourselves that we are, right? So when you string all your beliefs together, you get your identity narrative. And then finally, the top level is societal level. So the societal discourses, social location, what people say about, people who have problems like, our clients. And so we look at these 4 different levels in terms of conceptualizing the problem. And what's truly fascinating is that you can really map, every major theoretical approach that we have onto this. And most theories will, address maybe 2 of these levels. And so what happens when you use this unifying framework, all of a sudden, you're able to pull from so much more of the knowledge in the field to kind of understand what's going on with our clients. And this really enables you to have a very rich conceptualization that's much more nuanced than any one theory can do on its own. And then after you have that, then you filter it through the evidence base. And this is something that we really don't have a great way to access in our field, in terms of the practicing clinician knowing, what the research says about each of the major, disorders in the DSM. So using a template to help filter through, what's my client's problem and what does the research say should work best for that? So for example, obsessive OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, we now know that 95% of people, some kind of an exposure behavioral therapy is going to be most effective. And just using cognitive interventions typically doesn't work. And that's real important to understand. Similarly, we know for generalized anxiety, another form, right, of anxiety, most approaches are going to work well for that. And so understanding what's going on with your client and what the research says. And then finally, the same process we use to conceptualize the problem, we use to conceptualize health and the solution in terms of kind of thickening those with identity narratives and those positive narratives around wellness, as well as promoting lifelong wellness with what we call the 5 pillars of wellness, which again, this is not surprising, but it's, making sure our clients have healthy life habits like sleep, exercise, healthy eating, a strong support network, and, healthy coping skills that involve more than just a margarita on the beach, things like mindfulness or journaling, but to have real skills so that once they've, left treatment, they're able to maintain whatever their gains that they've learned with us.
Mm. I am so excited about Alma. When I had my private practice, I struggled building my caseload, attracting the right clients, managing the business side. And honestly, one of the reasons I didn't take insurance was it was so difficult to navigate. So many of my consulting clients deal with these problems as well. And Alma supports clinicians in building rewarding private practices with simplified insurance credentialing in under 45 days, enhanced reimbursement rates, and guaranteed 2-week payback, plus a free profile in their searchable, filterable directory, making it easy for clients who are the right fit for your practice to find you. Learn more about how Alma could support your private practice at helloalma.com/Joe. That's hello, ALMA.com/Joe to learn more. How do new therapists kind of screw this up, or what are some traps of newer therapists in regards to how they enter into those therapeutic relationships?
Well, so newer therapists are often one of the common mistakes I see with newer therapists is that they try to look and sound professional, and they try to have this expert stance. And
I gotta
often,
just pause you there and tell you, when I first graduated, as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was totally that. And I just gotta jump in with this story. I was 25. I was asked to teach a parenting class that was court mandated, not as a parent, and I grew a beard so I would look older and would act all like I would say, I don't have kids. I want you to know that. I am just the professional teaching you, and you have to apply it. But it was like so like if I grow a beard, then I'll look more professional. So,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I had to jump in there. So they try to act all
totally.
professional.
Yeah, and they try to sound professional, and like, they're so worried about not you looking like they don't know anything that they come off kind of aloof, and then they have this imposter syndrome. And the paradox, the irony is, okay, that clients actually like newer therapists better because usually they're more likable. But also because, if we go back to the holodeck, this not knowing, this openness, this curiosity, just willingness to truly listen from an open position without judgment. Newer therapists actually do that better than experienced therapists who are like, after the first 3 minutes, we're like, oh, I know this. I've heard this before. Oh, I know exactly where this is going. Right? No one wants to talk to someone who thinks they know where, knows my story better than me. Right? So newer therapists are really trying to look a certain way, or think that an expert sounds or does, or like you're saying, grow a beard, look a certain way, that they often totally mess up that one piece of how you connect in a really authentic way, because it's really that quality of your connection unlocks everything else. When people come through my course, I'm like, if you don't get this, what I call collaborative connecting correctly, if you don't get this, it's the key that unlocks everything else. You can have the best research in the world, the evidence-based treatment, but if you don't have that really attuned communication where clients feel like you are right there, nothing else works. And that's really what matters the most.
Hmm. Now, what about kind of like seasoned therapists that have been around a bit? Like, when you're not maybe in grad school, have things fresh in your mind. You're obviously doing continuing ed and things like that. But are there habits that you see that when it comes to psychotherapy, that seasoned therapists, like, what are the missteps maybe they're making?
Well, I think sometimes, when you've been doing this for a while, you begin to think you know it all. You kind of you think you know where it's going, what how this is going to end with your client. And the one thing I would challenge a seasoned clinician to do is to really slow down. And yes, it is true. Your hypothesis is probably correct. Okay, seasoned clinician, you're probably correct. However, you are going to be a lot more helpful if you can just slow down, be curious, look for the unique elements of this client's story, um, and to just really force yourself to slow down and be more curious, because usually what you get are these little gems that open up possibilities that you didn't see because you kind of jumped to conclusions. And so the one thing I will say is when you're really listening, to how your client is making sense and interpreting their lived experience, that should take 99% of your brain power. My mind never wanders. It's like I'm just following this breadcrumb trail and meaning, this happened, they understood this way, and then they said this, and so, and their partner responded this way, and this is how they interpreted that. And if I'm going to understand from their meaning making system and not mine, that should take like 99% of your brain power, so that you're always engaged. Your mind should never be wandering if you're really trying to understand how they see things. But when you work that way, it is amazing how everything kind of unfolds naturally, and the clients start putting all those new dots of meaning together, and our job becomes so much easier.
Yeah, I like that idea of seasoned therapists, like, kind of cautioning them to be like, I've seen this before. I know this narrative. Here's the direction we're going, without fully engaging with like what is the story and the mindset that person is entering into.
Yeah. And it's a discipline. I would say it requires discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, when you look at people that are kind of implementing this unified theory, like what does that look like kind of in ongoing assessment of the approach? What sort of kind of ongoing tools do people need to be thinking about?
Well, so what's nice about the framework, it's a system for what you're doing in the room. And so even, like when I train newer clinicians, what they find, like one of they all will often find that, they're one of the, one of my students got pulled in by the clinical director going, "What are you doing? You have the highest retention rate of anyone here." And they had licensed people, and she was like in her first 6 months of doing counseling, right? And she goes, "I don't know, I'm doing therapy that works." But it is this attuned communication that really transforms things. But it's easy. You can bring in almost any therapeutic model and language to use to help, guide your work. So there is this ability to have this framework that just is a very streamlined system for doing in the room that helps you use all the theories and to use all the research available to you. But then you can start integrating your own, favorite approaches or way of looking at things or interventions, on top of it.
Well, the last question I asked Diane is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
So I would say is that your work should be life-giving. It should fuel you. I mean, I'm hoping when you drive home at the end of the day, you feel like, wow, that's awesome. I can't believe I get paid to do this work. And that hopefully you feel and experience just the difference you make in people's lives. It's really a privilege to do this work. And so hopefully, my hope is that that you find the work this life-giving to you, as well as you're giving life to others. And if you're not doing that, if you're starting to feel burned out, to definitely look at ways of addressing that, connecting with others, so that it's really magical work, is what I have to say. And I hope you feel that every day.
So awesome. If people want to follow your work, if they want to read more about the unified theory, if they want to get your books, where should we send them?
I have a website called the Therapy That Works Institute.com, and I have online courses where I teach this. My books are there. I have lots of free resources for all of my textbooks, clinical forms, ironically, on all the different theories, because I've studied a lot of different theories. So, but yeah, therapythatworksinstitute.com.
Oh, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we have a packed schedule this month of helping you continue to have an even better year. If you've missed any of the episodes earlier in the month, we had one on 25 clinicians serving 50 countries, 100% online. We had one on sexual health with Canadian researcher Lori Brotto. We had best practices with employment law attorney John Gardner. We had writing compliant progress notes. We had a healing journey from Jordan to domestic violence and into leadership. So really interesting stories that we've had this month and ways that people can help you have an even better year. So go back and check out some of those. Also, we couldn't do this without our sponsors. Alma is our sponsor for today's episode, and Alma provides clinicians a rewarding private practice through simplified insurance credentialing in under 45 days. They help with reimbursement rates and guaranteed 2-week payback. So you can check more over at helloalma.com/Joe. Again, that's helloalma.com/Joe. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.